Hello, Assalamualaikum, welcome back, and today for Muet Preparatory course, we are going to look at a specific skills, one of the tasks that you're going to cater on later. And when it comes to Muet examination, we cannot run away from listening, right? So for listening, bear in mind that this is a test to test the taker's ability to understand spoken discourse in higher education context, covering both monologues and dialogues. What does it mean? Dialogues mean you have interaction between people. There are at least two people there, and then monologue will be the only one person are talking to you or talking to themselves, right? So when it comes to listening itself, as mentioned previously, there's a difference between before 2021 and until now. You will have 50 minutes to answer the questions. There are 5 parts we're going to look at later on. What are the 5 parts? It comprises of 90 marks, which later on contributes towards 25% from the final mark, right? So please bear in mind, even though it stated 90 marks, there's only 30 multiple choice questions. This time around, there will be no more short answer questions, everything MCQ. Okay, it will be much easier for you to answer everything. I believe so. Right. When it comes to listening, these are the parts that you have to consider, that you have to pay attention. First one is part 1. For part 1, a dialogue between two people. There are 7 questions, level at level A2 to B1. This is really easy level. For part 2, a monologue in the form of lecture, talk or briefing. 7 questions as well, but this time around the language used are between B1 to B2 level of TFR. And for part 3, there are 3 monologues from 3 people. You only have 3 questions. But remember, 3 monologues from 3 people. 3 questions leveled at B2 CEFR level. So it will be quite, not to say difficult, but quite complex when it comes to the question later on. Number 4, for part 4, you will listen to 1 dialogue where you have to answer 7 questions. The questions are rated at B2. And last one, part 5, you have 3 short dialogues between 2 people. 3 short dialogues between 2 people, which will give you 6 questions rated at B2 until C1. So as you can see here, part 1 until part 5, you can see that the questions are getting more difficult. So how many times are you going to listen to the audio? As previous format as well, you will listen twice to the audio itself. Alright, so have you ample of time to mark and to check your answer later. Okay, now let's look at the parts itself, how the question is going to be. Right, first of all, this you can see here, part 1, this is the questions, right? Really easy, right? You have experienced this kind of questions since, I believe, since primary school, I guess, right? So these questions for part 1, the task focus is for you to identify general and specific information, understanding simple phrases and expressions, and understanding main ideas. So you will listen to the audio and then just answer the questions. That's it. The only difference is, if you look at here, look at question number 7. What is the difference there? So for part 1, there's one part of the questions where you have to visualize what is being said, right? For example, in this question, which map shows the correct position of the 3 food stalls? You can see later, you can listen later on in the audio, they describe the location. So you have to see from the picture here which one is which. Okay, so this might not be the exact questions, but the question is something like that. Some others might ask you the location of a certain building, or some might ask you the direction to go somewhere, but the idea is like that. There's one question for part 1 where you have to transfer the information into visual, something like this. Okay, so that's for part 1. Now let's look at part 2. For part 2, it's more or less what you have experienced before, but on a different level. The task focus is for you to identify general and specific information, understanding simple phrases and expression, understanding main ideas, understanding familiar and unfamiliar topics, and following a standard speech. standard speech. That's the idea there, okay? So for this particular question, later on we're going to see on the class how to cover it. But the main idea is this question talks about one idea, and you have to find out the details for the question from the audio itself. All right. Okay, so that's part 2. Simple. Next, let's look at part 3. Part 3 is where you will listen to 3 people, a conversation, a dialogue between 3 people. So you have 3 questions. 3 people, 3 questions in a dialogue. Alright, so they are talking to each other. You will have to find out the main ideas here. You have to follow the standard speech and complete lines from the argument there for you to find out where is the answer. It may be something like this: which speaker said what. It may be something like which statement continues with something else. Alright, so we're going to look at later more on this one. Okay, so this is part 3. Now for part 4, we're going back as equal, more or less like what you have in part 2. You have to listen to the audio, but this time it is more dialogue. In part 2 it is monologue, one person talking. This is dialogue. A lot of there are 2 people are talking, so you have to listen to who said what. Okay, the trick here, something that they do to confuse you is that they add another person in the story, not as the speaker. Okay, so you have to make sure on that. No worry, we're going to look at this one by one later on in class. And part 5, part 5 is where you have this. You have 3 dialogues. For each dialogue, there will be 2 people speaking. Alright, so you have to answer questions based on that dialogue, based on the dialogue that be presented to you. Dialogue 1 for question 25-26, dialogue 2 for 27-28, and dialogue 3 for 29 and 30. Alright, the main idea here, the main focus here for you to follow less structured implied message in a standard speeches. What do they say when they have a conversation there? That is the main idea when you are answering this question for part 5. Alright, so that's it. All you need to know about format for the question for the listening part, because later on when we come to the class, we are going to do exercise. We're going to find out the strategies. How are you going to answer the questions part by part? Alright, so please do not get overwhelmed yet. It's really easy actually if you know the trick, and that trick will be discussed later on during our session face-to-face in class. Alright, that's all for today. That's all for this video. See you later.